I'll split it into three parts. One is colonial loot, one is just after independence, and then now. So if you take colonial loot to me is why I want to call it colonial loot, because it's plunder. And a lot of museums are waking up now. The British Museum has long fought the case of the Elgin marbles, and in fact I called the Amaravati limestones that are there with them the Elliot limestones, because it's the same. So there was actually a British official who said, don't move it, it's not our job to plunder. We can actually reconstruct the Amaravati stupa with the stuff that is fallen down, but then by which time they were already shipped. So it was split three ways, one into the Madras Museum, one into the Calcutta Museum, and the rest to the British Museum. And they lay there for 8 years in the open in a haystack before they were put up, and they were badly damaged. And today they have been put in a special room and all that. But then imagine if they had gone back to the site, hardly anybody visits Amaravati. Okay, Chandrababu Naidu wants to create a new capital, but you don't know that Amaravati is a center of Buddhist learning in the 3rd century BC, and there are hundreds of sites, so nobody visits there. So it's hardly 4 hours from here, but I bet 99% of people have not even known that it is a Buddhist site. So you have the British, and then you look at the V&A, for example, Lord Curzon. So he was in Mahabalipuram, and then he moved to Pondicherry. In Pondicherry, there was a buried Vishnu that was bought up, and there was an auction. And if you go to the V&A, it said bequeathed by Lord Curzon, who bought it in an auction. But then if you imagine, he was the viceroy, he sees a Vishnu and is put up an auction, the viceroy bids. You think any of the locals will bid against the Durai? So it's basically, the narrative is different. So similarly, there was another bronze, Kongu bronze, which we don't even get to see in India, which was found in Coimbatore, which again, bequeathed by Lord Curzon after auction. Take the case of Mahabalipuram, everybody thinks Ganesha Ratha. Ganesha worship was not even there when the Pallavas were there. It was a Shiva shrine. There was a Shivalinga inside. The British collector came in, took the Shivaling. The next one who came took the Nandi in front. The villagers installed a Ganapati inside, and today it's Ganesha Ratha. So people don't even know that there was a Shiva temple over 100 years. The entire knowledge is gone that there was something there. God knows where the Linga and Nandi are now. Maybe in some British general's luxury apartment or somewhere. In Trankebar, which is Tarangambadi, Peter Anker, the Dutch collector, he was extending his fort, and he comes up with a buried hoard of 30 bronzes. And obviously these bronzes belong to Tarangambadi, Maslamanada temple. But then for some reason he tells the locals that these have lost power, there is no temple nearby, I am taking them. So when he went back, he went into financial difficulties, the prince bought it, and he's put it up in the National Museum now. So beautiful Nataraja, Somaskandar, the whole set is there. The narrative is Peter Anker bought it from the locals, and the prince bought it from Peter Anker. Now I went and looked at the original records. What did he buy for? What did he buy for? He gave them a bag of rice, and the guys gave him betel nuts. So basically, Taramata kuduthirukkan, Samiya. So the narrative there, it says he bought it from the locals. What did he buy? He bought a bag of rice. And then another one, he went to Karnataka, he gave them a pair of spectacles. So this is what buying means. So I'm saying you people should actually say, you should be ashamed to say it's bought. If this is the narrative, no? You buy giving the locals a specs or a bag of rice, and that's how bad the situation was, and how bad the history has been twisted to reveal as though it's a legitimate purchase. And then we come into closer to the 1970, between the gap between 1947 and hundreds of stuff left our shores. Most of that, every returning diplomat used to carry it back. And it was the uninterrupted supply of stuff.
The Indian diplomats?
No, the foreign diplomats who returned back would take it back. And
so it was a very official way of taking.
No, it's a diplomatic pouch. It has diplomatic immunity. So I'll give you two cases. One, you go to the Metropolitan Museum. There's this huge 15 feet seated enthroned Vishnu stone. I've never seen such a huge seated Vishnu in any of the temples in Tamil Nadu. It is a Pandya temple, so we never know where it was. It was bought from a person in Chennai in 1968. And it is reached via Narang, who was convicted, or rather he was charged with antiquity smuggling in the 1980s. And the Metropolitan Museum still displays it. Now, how did it leave India shores? Because at that point of time, India had its own laws which asked for an export permit. Somebody should ask the Met Museum, did you get an export permit for this? So a lot of such stuff are moving around. So there was another one of a Nataraja that was caught by customs in 1967 in Calcutta. So this was a shipment bound for a Nepali royal family as a books. When they opened the cargo, it was a Nataraja inside. Because it was the royal thing, they couldn't charge. But then they should have returned it to Tamil Nadu or find which temple it was stolen from. They just put it in the Indian Museum in Calcutta quietly. And that's where I'm saying, by just putting it into a museum, they just shut the case so that you don't know how it was trafficked from India to Calcutta. From basically Tamil Nadu, how did it reach? So the idea every time is to have a photo op, return one idol, don't go after the network. So it's been something that we've been fighting on to say that, look, we can work our volunteers to get maybe one or two, because that's where we have access to because of the archive. But if we don't follow the leads on this and try to find out the entire chain and dismantle the network, we will continue to lose. And post-independence, post-1970, there was a craze about Indian art because there was one Indian scholar, another celebrated scholar, who encouraged American millionaires, oil-rich millionaires, to invest in Cholamandalas, for example. So he basically tells them, buy this, it's a good investment, you have so much money, it's coming cheap, buy it. And this is an Indian guy who didn't find a job in India, he's gone to America, he's a curator of all the big museums. The museum doesn't have the budget to buy, so he asks rich people to buy it and gift it to the museum. So this is our own stuff, our own kind doing it. But then what happens next? Because of this greed, dollar-driven greed, people are coming to India, they're coming on recce trips, they go on trips with these smugglers and looters, they pick and choose the very best of Indian art, obviously led by our own books, so they get all the published books, they get support from all the local scholars who are looking for handouts, they go and visit these sites, and then it's ordered looting on an industrial scale, meaning these guys pick the best of Indian art. Like if you go to Mount Abu in Rajasthan, there are no Jain Tirthankaras original in any of those temples. Every single piece is a new replacement, and not a single mutt has filed a complaint. All these are in various museums, including prestigious educational institutions in the US hold these collections. Now, how did these happen is because it's, as you said, it's not some random thief breaking into the night. This is people, in fact, if you look at Peter Watson's book called Sotheby's The Inside Story in 1998, he has a chapter on India. And there he says these guys used to come, file TA bills. Basically, they were putting travel allowance for visiting sites where they go and mark. So this was like Punubakkaradumari. So these guys earlier used to come, now they are fed on social media. So they get WhatsApp images, you want it, I'll get it for you. So this is looting on a targeted scale that is happening now. Earlier these guys used to come, visit, stay and mark, this will sell, this will not sell. And then the looters would be assigned the task. And that's what happened with Subhash Kapoor as well. They would go pick these uninhabited villages where these sites are, and they would go pick and choose. They'll take one, nobody required. 2 days later, they'll go pick the rest. 3 days later, go empty the temple. So this is what has been happening. The intermediary points are generally Hong Kong and Bangkok. So that's where it is inspected. So what we know is they hoodwink the customs by putting a very low dollar value. They go under, fly under the radar. So if the customs is saying 40,000 rupees or $1,000 is the bracket, they value it less than that. So in fact, the Nataraja that we bought back from the National Gallery for $5.6 million, which they bought, which is again priceless for us, when they returned without restitution, so the Australia lost 5.6 million, it was valued at $300 as brassware when it was shipped out of India as an open LCL container. So there are a lot of lacunae in the system, because when you get a non-antiquity certificate, you basically take an object to the Fort Museum, show it to the ASI person there, and he looks at it and then takes a photograph, and then he tags the photograph with an ID with which you can export it for 6 months later. So there is no physical match between what he certified and what is actually exported out, except for a photograph. And tell me which customs clerk, even if I were to believe that he is honest and naive and whatever, you know what happens with all this. So we are talking about millions and billions of dollars, and you could get worse with a few lakh rupees in India now. So sadly, for $1 million, you could break into a lot of temples in India. So that's where we are working on. We're working on cutting down the demand, at least the official demand, so that at least now in Australia they lost about $20 million so far. No museum is going to buy an Indian art with unclear provenance. So at least it's akin to rhinos, right? The killing stops and the buying stops. What they do is they take it to London. From London, it goes to Switzerland. From Switzerland, it's brought back to London as though it's a property of Swiss collector from the 1900s, and then it's washed. So this becomes a modus operandi for most of the objects that are coming out there. And in fact, to just give you an example of how big the pockets of the art market are, not Indian antiquities, Greek, Italian antiquities. There was this collector called Robin Shimes in London who was charged. He had a spat with his partner died, and all that. So they found that he had been paying rent for a room inside the Swiss free port in Geneva for 30 years. For 30 years, his room was never opened. So he was charged for trafficking and he was out in bail in 4 months in 2012. In 2014, the Italian police, for the first time, got an order and enforced it in the Geneva Fish Report. They found $20 million worth of Greek antiquities inside this room, which had now been open for 30 years. So this is the holding power of the art market too. We call it fencing in the art world. So they fence this object, still they go away from public memory. See, I'll give you this example. We got back this Nalanda Buddha that was looted from the ASI museum in Nalanda, which is the most sacred Buddhist site. There was two thefts had happened in 1961 and 1962 early. 14 plus 2 bronzes were stolen. And these bronzes are still we are searching for. We have managed to find two. One more is almost done. So the rest are still hidden. We don't know where they are. And then it came up for sale after 57 years in an art fair in Netherlands. As luck would have it, one of our volunteers was there and they could photograph it and send it to me over WhatsApp. And I remembered from another volunteer who had sent us this photograph months ago, which has now been revealed to the public for so many years. It was purely luck. I knew that this was Nalanda style, and then we managed to track it down. After 6 months, the object was handed over in August 15th at the London High Commission. But then, that some collector had held this piece for 57 years before he put it up for sale is something that, that is how big the market is. See, the thing is, you need to make sure that there is no open case. Like somebody like me, maybe they think I will have interest for another 10 years. So after 10 years, if they bring an object, maybe I grow tired or my project doesn't outlive me, and then they are open to sell. So this is the need why this kind of initiative should not be linked to an individual, it should be perpetual. And we hope that the government or somebody would take this on and run. Today, there is 2-3 motives for it. Earlier, it was purely a collector's obsession, which reduces our sacred art into showpiece curios. But then the second part now is becoming an investment. People are buying it as investment that appreciates. The third part is it hides wealth. And lastly, people are using it to tax breaks as well. So in the Western world, if you gift something to a museum, you get tax breaks that you can carry forward for 4 or 5 years. And this valuation is subjective. So a piece could be valued by a valuer, because if I hold it for 10 years, the value appreciates, and so technically I can give anything I want. I can have a hall in my grandmother's name, throw a party in my name, and the museum will have a grand ball for whatever, and then enjoy a tax break as well. So sadly, that's what is happening. So there are multiple incentives now compared to, say, a few decades ago. We now know that it funds money laundering, it funds corrupt people. After the Panama Papers, people don't put their money in banks, they just move it out into free ports, wherein you can transfer $1 million from one side to another with no deals. And then we also now know that it funds terrorism. One of the number 3 item in IC's income was sale of antiquity licenses. So they does profit from illicit antiquity trafficking, and this is one of the reasons why the Western world's outlook on illicit trafficking of antiquities has changed. So if you see the statistics between 2000 and 2015, from 2009 you see a big drop in the open market sale of auctioning of antiquities. That's because the US started looking at it with real serious intent, because they knew that their soldiers were being killed with possibly arms bought from antiquities. And now Europe has begun to wake up as well. These goods are shipped into Bangkok and Hong Kong, where the buyer comes. These guys officially are paid the very small amount declared in customs. The balance money has to come to them. How does it come? It comes from Hong Kong via Hawala. So there is this huge money that is coming through these channels, which have links to all these terrorism and the uglier side. So I think at a national level, we need to understand that this is not a few temple idols that are being smuggled out by small-time thieves. This is a well-oiled machinery that is now perfected to hoard and launder money, launder art, and fund money back into India through all these nefarious channels. Specifically in terms of Hindu gods and Jain gods, for example, they are personifications of the divine. We call it Tirumeni in Tamil, basically meaning they're body of God. So technically these are body of God who live in the abode. They are woken up, singing songs, they're bathed, they are clothed, they are fed, they're dried, their marriages happen to them, and then the night they're put to sleep by singing songs. So they actually live their life inside. So to abruptly grab them out of their homes and to sell for human greed is something that the Western world has to realize, that this is not some showpiece curio. This is somebody's life that you're robbing of.